Let me call to order the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency meeting for today, Wednesday, January 28th. If you'll please rise. Mike, you'll lead us.
Please follow me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. Okay, roll call.
Chair Mulhart?
Yep.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Here.
Director Borchard?
Here.
Okay, Bob Aranio is there, and I see Neil is there, so I got 1, 2, and those are the only 2 alternates that I see. All right. Agenda review.
Just a reminder, Mr. Chairman, that item 6 has been pulled.
I'm sorry?
Item number 6 has been pulled.
Oh, item number 6 pulled, that's right. Okay. Okay, all right. Public comments, anybody have any comments for the agency not on the agenda? I didn't see anybody. Board member comments?
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
I will not be at this next meeting. I'll be on my way back from Washington, D.C., but Neil Andrews has said he would be here for me.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. Very good. Let's deal with item 1.
Move the approval.
Now, a second.
Chair, I noticed a little
Oh.
typo in the minutes there. Maybe just want to draw attention to is a page 7 of 10, down at the bottom of the page, second paragraph from the bottom.
Second of 10. Second paragraph.
7 of 10. Second paragraph from the bottom.
Okay.
Second sentence says, he directed staff to return with modifications that are closer to approach C and address the fundamental question in approach A, should all surface water, I think that's intended to be surface water.
Okay.
Okay, move the approval with the one change.
All right. A second.
Second.
Okay. Any objection? Okay. So ordered. Informational item number 2. By the way, Andy Waters just came in as an alternate.
Chair Mulhart, board members, Gerhard Huebner, for the record, I'll just be introducing the speaker, which will be Tony Morgan from United Water Conservation District. Tony will be providing us with a presentation and a status report on their proposed South Oxnard Plain brackish water treatment facility and the feasibility study that they've completed to date. So with that, I'd like to invite Tony to come up and do his presentation.
Good afternoon, Directors, Chair. For the record, I'm Tony Morgan, Deputy General Manager for Groundwater and Water Resources at United Water, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. We're going to chat about the South Oxnard Plain brackish water treatment feasibility study that United has just completed and give you an update on where we are with that project and just introduce you to the concepts that go around with that project. Let's see if we can go. Excellent. Okay, background on the project we're going to talk about today, some issues of water quality and why we are considering this particular project. We'll talk about the processes and the design of this treatment facility, a little bit on cost and some conclusions at the end. So why are we talking about this project? Let's give a thumbnail sketch of what the idea is. We need to start with an overview of the project and think of this project as a new water source. The concept was to explore the idea of a brackish water treatment facility as a new water resource and to sort of change the dogma, change the thinking. In the past, we've operated a lot of the time under the impression that having seawater intrusion in our aquifers is a bad thing, and so our management decisions were based in part on how are we going to manage that. Are we going to push it back? Are we going to control it, keep it where it is? And that's such a rationale. What we're offering today here is the other side of the coin. Let's look at this situation where the intruded aquifers can be an asset, and then how would we take advantage of that situation and turn it into an asset? So what's the concept? The concept is we're going to go down to the area near the coast where we have the intruded aquifers. So you can see that area there. Okay? We're going to extract the water, treat it, and deliver that water into the PTP and the PV systems. That gives us access to a large number of folks who can make good use, make beneficial use of that groundwater there. So the extraction well field is your source of water. In the future, it's a barrier to seawater intrusion. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay? We have a disposal mechanism. The SMP pipeline is nearby. The treatment technology is there. It's relatively simple to make that water into a quality that's acceptable for agricultural use. And it's a pretty flexible operation. If we don't need the water, we don't have to run the plant. So let's step through that in a little more detail. This is the concept, and so you have an idea of where we're going now. So let's take a look at what we're dealing with seawater intrusion with right now. This is the classic presentation that you've seen from United and others on how seawater intrusion has been portrayed on the South Oxnard Plain. And so the Hueneme Submarine Canyon is a source for this lobe of impaired water. The Magoo Submarine Canyon is the source for this lobe of impaired water. And so we map that out based on these red wells out here, where are monitoring wells, and some of the blue wells out here, which are water supply wells. So we're using that water quality to map out what we think the areal extent of it is. We understand that during periods of low water levels, which we have right now, okay, we see, and let's just talk about this lobe right here, for example, seawater intrusion comes in and begins to move inward. As it moves inward, we come out of a drought period, water levels come back up, and instead of that impaired water retreating back offshore, what happens is it's swept down the coast. Okay, so we don't push it back offshore all the way. Some of it moves down the coast. Okay, and that's a function of the water levels and the gradients that we establish by recharging the forebay and other areas. So as we push that down the coast, we leave some of it out here on the South Oxnard Plain. And so I want you to pay particular attention to this little area right in here. So there's Hueneme Road, just to give you an orientation. There's Edison Road. There's Arnold and Casper. So remember that area, because we're going to come back and talk about that again in a few moments. In 2010, United did a surface geophysical study to try to map out in a little more detail where we think the saline water is. Okay? And we come up with a depiction like this. There are several maps of this sort that your staff and yourselves have seen in various documents from United and from staff here. Basically, the dark blue is the saline waters, the sort of turquoise-ish light blue is the brackish water, and the gray is the slightly brackish water scenarios. What do we surmise from this? The leading edge of the seawater intrusion is not a front. It's not a wave. Okay, it's got a very ragged front edge to it, okay, which makes it a little more difficult when you're trying to design a remediation system or a mitigation system with an ejection barrier well field, for example. So as we're looking through these kinds of data, we realize that not only does it vary by depth and by place and by time. So if we look at a single well as an example right here, okay, and we look at the various depths from which we have water samples, we can see what the chloride concentrations do over time. And let's just use this first one as an example. The blue bar represents the maximum chloride value in that water, in that well in 1990. Red represents the maximum value in 2009. The sort of yellowish color there represents the maximum seen over that roughly 19-year window. So when someone asks me, how far inland has the seawater intrusion moved, I got to know where on the ground, at what depth, and when did you ask that question to be referred to? Because the information is different as we go. So this is not just a standalone situation. Here's another well, very similar kind of scenario. So it's a complicated situation, and we think that the proposed brackish water treatment plant offers us a scenario to get around some of this complexity and deal with it from a groundwater management perspective in the future. So let's talk about the treatment feasibility study. What did we do? United commissioned Carollo engineers to prepare a feasibility study. Major questions: is it technically feasible to take that brackish water and treat it? Okay? And would that desalter plant give us a long-term reliable supply of water? We looked at whether or not there was raw water available. Is there a brine disposal option? And would we have a place for that treated water to go? And so we'll talk about that in a moment. When you design these kinds of treatment facilities, the rule is you tell me what you're starting with, you tell me what you want to end with, and then we'll decide what we do in between that two endpoints to get there. What treatment technology is going to work best. And so we started out by looking at those red dots you saw out there on the earlier map. Those are our monitoring wells. We gave that water quality to the consultants. They came up with a composite raw water out there, and then we wanted a series of buffers on that, a security. So that number was increased by 50%, and so we ended up with what we thought was our maximum worst case water quality out there. The guise is here, we're going to design the treatment facility for a TDS ranging, let's just call it 6,000 to 10,000 milligrams per liter. That's the target operational scheme for the plant. Okay, that was the raw water. Here's the product water. Here's the treated water. So we talked to a few of the agricultural folks and said, what would you like to have? And so this is sort of the water quality that we came up with. This is pretty decent quality water. Is it as good as coming out of the AWPF? No, it's not. TDS is not as low. A few of the other parameters aren't quite as low. But it's pretty good quality water. And it meets potable standards for a lot of things. Not quite all, but most of it. So now we have a raw water. We have a product water, what we're going to get to. So how did we come up with a technology? 3 of them are looked at: reverse osmosis, electrodialysis, and distillation. Decision was not practical, certainly not competitive, cost-wise, at the concentrations we're talking about dealing with. So we're talking about a system that's reverse osmosis based. We're pretty far along in the feasibility study with the process design for this plant. We've got the 3 main stages, the pre-treatment, the RO system, and the post-treatment, all lined out. So we've gotten pretty far along with it, so we feel confident when we say we think this technology is feasible, that we've taken into consideration several of the major variables. We asked the engineers to do this kind of design for 2 different treatment capacities. One is a 10,000 acre-foot per year plant. The second is a 20,000 acre-foot per year plant. And so just to give you a little bit of a visual, that's kind of what the 20,000 acre-foot per year facility might look like. There's a large storage tank on there for some more or less instantaneous capacity. That's about a 4 million gallon tank that would hold approximately 5 hours worth of production at a 20,000 acre-foot per year plant. Okay? So where would this plant and the associated well field that we mentioned earlier might be located? Okay? For the feasibility study, you have to give the engineers a spot on the ground. You have to say, we think the plant might be here, we think the well might be over there, and they work out the piping system accordingly. So for the purposes of the feasibility study, and for nothing else, we haven't selected any locations, but for the feasibility study, we had a system here with a well field, proposed desalter facility there, and just to orient you, this is Wanimi Road. There's East Pleasant Valley Road. There's Edison. It gives you an idea of where you are. There you can see the airfield at Magoo. Wanimi's off the edge of the slide here. Green line is the SMP, the salinity management pipeline. That would be our brine disposal facility for this project. The concept is with the product water, that which we've made out of the treatment plant, that would be delivered up to the PTP system, and the pipeline extended on out and connected to the Pleasant Valley County water system there. That gives us access to a lot of users out on the coastal plain area. The well field is 12 wells as proposed. The desalter facility is listed here. Okay, that's about a 20-acre parcel that has been identified of MWD as a future site of a desal facility. There's a lot of interest in that facility with respect to the Ormond Beach restoration efforts and that kind of thing. So that facility doesn't have to be there. It can be anywhere out here. It doesn't. That's really not a material factor in this discussion. So one of the beauties that we think we've built into this system is that not only are we delivering water out here to satisfy some of the active irrigation demand, if we can tie into those systems and the wells are appropriate along those systems, those wells can be used as injection points during periods when we have low demand, diurnal periods. At night, we don't need irrigation water, but we need it during the day. So at night, the water can be used to recharge the aquifers directly. In worst case scenario, a pipeline could be built and the plant's product water could be delivered to the spreading grounds in the forebay that United has and used to replenish the aquifers there. But for this project, we're looking at two main distribution systems, into the PTP and into the PV. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. One option that's come up relatively recent, and let's zoom in just a little bit on the image here, is the city of Oxnard is looking at acquiring some vacant land near the AWPF facility for a park and some other things, and they have expressed at least an early interest that if the brackish water treatment plant wanted to be located there, they think a 3 or 4 acre parcel, which is about what that plant size would be appropriate to there. So we have some options as to where we might locate. Notice that everything we have drawn here is just inside the Coastal Commission boundary. That's the red line on this one. So we're inside that boundary.
What boundary is that again?
Coastal.
That's the Coastal Commission boundary. Okay. So now we're talked a little bit about the well field here. Why here? Well, one of the easiest things is construction logistics. Constructing a well field, pipeline and wells in an agricultural setting is much easier than doing it in an urban setting. There's less headaches and grief and construction costs associated with that. But there's a more technical issue that goes along with it. So if you remember back earlier, I gave you the map showing the extent of the seawater intrusion. If we overlay that with the proposed well field location, we'll see that we're right in a decent spot right here to intercept both the seawater intrusion from this direction and the seawater intrusion coming from the Magoo area as well. So we've got a situation where we're right in an area where we have a mix of higher TDS wells, lower TDS waters, and when we blend those two, we think we can remain within our 6,000 to 10,000 TDS operational scheme. Okay. The slide you've all been waiting for is the money slide, right? So what are we looking at for this project? Two sizes, 10,000 acre-foot year and 20,000 acre-foot per year. Capital costs running from, let's just call it $85 million to $148 million, depending on the size of the facility you wish to construct. Okay. Recovery costs, that I mean capital O&M, annual O&M and capital recovery rather, you're looking at something on, let's call it $1,000 to maybe $1,200 an acre-foot as a reasonable number for this kind of technology. Okay. So as we queried the consultants, the engineers on this project, to give us the answers we're looking for. Do we have raw water available? The answer was yes. Is it technically feasible? They said definitely yes. This is not rocket science that you're asking us to do. This is standard off-the-shelf technology. Do we have a brine disposal option? Yes, we do. The S&P pipeline is in place, and much to the credit of Callegas, that facility is now available for us to use. Brine disposal is usually the stumbling block for these kinds of projects. There's no place to put the brine that's economical. We now have a venue for that. Are there places to send the treated water? Yes, there are. Okay. Are the costs viable for a long-term water supply? We think they are. Water costs are going to continue to rise. This $1,000 to $1,200 number is right there in the same ballpark as others. Now, with any project, there's pros and cons. Let's talk a little bit about the cons associated with it. We may induce seawater intrusion towards the well field. I don't think there's any may about it. We will. We're talking about pumping, let's say on the 20,000 acre foot facility, we're going to pump 28,000 acre feet of impaired water to generate 20,000 acre foot of treated water. Okay, we are going to induce seawater intrusion, but we don't really care so much because it's going towards our well field. We're going to control it. It goes towards the well field where we can extract and treat that water and use it as a source for our facility. Might the TDS increase in the future as we pull more seawater towards our plant? Possibly yes. Possibly yes, and we'll have to do some modeling to determine how fast and to what degree that occurs. But remember, at the same time, as we're inducing seawater intrusion towards the well field, we're also inducing cleaner water to come from inland areas towards the well field also. So there's going to be some sort of balancing effect that occurs with that. So we think that's a doable scenario where we can keep the TDS within the range we need for operation of the facility. We may impact water levels and water quality for some upper system wells near the well field. That's correct. We probably will. The wells that are out in that general area are irrigation wells. So if that's the scenario, the mitigation is relatively simple. They tie onto the product distribution line to replace their water with the treated product water from out there. There are some pros that go along with that also. It has a water supply benefit. It's a reliable new source of water. It's sustainable. We've got the ocean there as our source water, so we're not going to run out of that in any foreseeable scenario. There's some water quality benefits. Early in the project, during the extraction phase, we're going to be doing a bit of aquifer rehabilitation. We're going to be pulling some of that brackish water out and making the water quality better. Later in the project phase, it's going to shift into more of the extraction barrier scenario, where we're going to induce flow towards the well field, induce the flow towards where we want it to go. So if there's a drought in the future, that's fine. We've already got the hydraulic system set up to capture that and bring it towards the well field. Groundwater management. There's in lieu recharge benefits here. We're going to deliver water to PTP and PV systems so that there could be less pumping out there. There's also direct recharge in that we can have the wells on the PTP system, for example, act as injection points. So when we have excess water during diurnal periods, nighttime, rainy weeks where we don't really need the irrigation water, we have the ability to put that water back in the ground directly. And we've got a pretty flexible operation. Unlike a wastewater treatment plant that has to run pretty much 24/7 because it's got a steady stream of product coming to it, in this case, if there came some scenario down the road and we didn't need water for any reason for 2 weeks, shut the plant down. It's not a big deal. The technology exists to shut down and restart a plant like this, and it's relatively straightforward. Okay, where are we at? Next steps. We've collected some additional water quality analyses out there in the proposed wellfield area. We want to look at things like pesticides, chlorinated solvents, metals, things that we don't normally do in our water quality analyses to make sure there are no hidden speed bumps along the way as we move forward. We're doing some grant research. We have a consultant on board right now that's trying to identify grant opportunities. There are a lot of money floating out there in the state and federal programs, and we think this project will be viewed very favorably by those folks with grant money to distribute. And we're in the middle of the stakeholder outreach. I've got several meetings with various entities to go through this project, answer questions, and address what's going on there. Coming up shortly, we need to get the real estate for the treatment plant and the well field tied down. Okay, we need to make some decisions as to where we think that treatment plant. If it's over by the AWPF, that's fine. We just need to know so that we can begin to lay out piping and well field designs that are appropriate for that. We'll do some exploratory test holes out in the area of the proposed well field to make sure the water quality is what we think it is there with each step. Remember, we're only talking about the upper system, so we're talking about, maybe down to 400 feet, something like that below surface. Finally, we need to get a electrical power load study initiated with Southern California Edison, but they can't start that to decide until we decide where we want the plant. Where is that big power demand going to be? And if it's by the AWPF, that's one thing. If it's out towards the agricultural area, that's a totally different thing. And so we need to get that done so we can get ready to start the CEQA process. We know that when we start the CEQA process, one of the speed bumps we're going to encounter is greenhouse gases. Okay? Because RO membranes are power hogs. They're a power-intensive operation. And so one of the ideas that we're talking about is, does this project benefit from having solar power included as a component of it? The one thing United does have is land. Okay? So if a solar field helped us get through the CEQA process and offset some of the demand that we would place on the system, then we'll explore the idea and see if solar power makes sense for us. As far as next steps, there need to be some probable GSA conversations. The project benefits from this effort can be realized if the product water, if the treated water is used to offset demand, offset our existing demand, and isn't used to expand demand out on the coastal plain. So that's something that the GSA needs to consider as they move forward. And if this project moves forward, how would that take place? How is that new water going to be used within the system as we work towards a sustainable pattern? There's a fundamental shift in how groundwater and water is going to be managed in the future in Ventura County. This sort of, we'll call it a strategic inflection point in groundwater management, is going to require water policy folks, such as everyone in this room who are involved in that in one form or another, to think about things that in the past weren't palatable. Things that were too expensive, idea too far out of the box. I think we're moving into a time where we're going to look at things with a little bit different shade in our glasses as we review water sustainability programs. Anyway, this project falls clearly into that realm. I won't take any more of your time today. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to attempt to answer them.
Okay. Any members? Yeah, good.
There's a lot to like about a project that can be potentially new water. And if this was a desal plant out in the ocean, I wouldn't have this concern. But when you had your checklist there, is there raw water available? Mm-hmm. Is there one of the things that wasn't on your checklist was, will this cause more saltwater intrusion or not? And then you did put that in your cons. You said yes, it would. Yes, it will. And then you said, but we don't care because we can control it. And the other thing that you said there at the end is this only makes sense if it offsets demand. And I assume that's because you would stop pumping someplace else. But this, I mean, the mission of Fox Canyon has been to stop and reverse, at mm-hmm. least halt the groundwater, the saltwater intrusion. This is going to draw more, make it easier for saltwater to come in, correct?
Correct. It's going to be induced to move towards the well field.
Right. And that doesn't also mean that in certain periods it's going to have the ability to, it's going to be less likely that we have the pressure we need to be able to push it out. And I guess that's one of the questions I have for you. You said when we do have heavy rains and it actually pushes it down the coast. Right. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, obviously, I think in a perfect world we would rather push it back offshore.
Right.
But that's not the way the system operates. That's just not the way it works. And so sweeping it down the coast keeps it from going further inland, but it keeps overlapping the same areas. I mean, we see signatures from the 1990. We think barely we're starting to see the signatures from this drought period with chlorides beginning to creep. We'll come back and talk to you about that later when we have more data about that. So we're not so much worried about it moving down along the coast. That's in an area that's impaired and has been impaired for a long time. Okay, so we're not impairing new land. Okay, we're in an area that's going to be impacted ultimately. Does that help?
Well, that's the beginning. It seems I have a lot of questions about how this if you take 10,000 or 20,000 acre feet of this mm-hmm. water right there, mm-hmm. that you're not going to bring more salt water in, and therefore, I mean, in fact, as you said, there will increase saltwater intrusion, and how that's not going to make the problem worse. It's not been explained.
It's going to move towards the well field. There will be saltwater intrusion. There already is saltwater intrusion. I think that's the point I'm not emphasizing. There is already saltwater intrusion in that area. So if you remember the two lobes that were moving sort of towards each other, right. Okay, there's already saltwater intrusion there. And so what we're doing is placing a well field in between those two lobes, okay, to intercept both of them.
I mean, you talk about it, but it's going to increase the amount of salt water coming in,
Correct,
correct?
correct.
Won't that be more saltwater intrusion?
Will there be more salt in the water? Yes. Will it cover a geographically larger area? No. Because we're going to extract it out of the ground.
Tony, go back in your slides and put the one slide that had that, and so everybody can see and refocus on the area you're talking about.
This one? Or do you want to go back farther?
No, I think that's the one I think Steve's talking about. Your comment was that you've placed the well fields, so if you get heavy salt water from the south or new salt water coming in, it's going to be basically sucked into that area. And as I understand what you're saying, is that it's really the question of what expanded seawater intrusion is. If the definition of expanded seawater intrusion is that those areas that are already intruded, the concentration of salt water goes up, that's one definition. If another definition is that the geographic area,
The footprint.
starts to creep out further and further, then that's another footprint.
Right.
And I think what Tony is saying is historically we've had this problem since the 20s and 30s when we first identified it. It was relatively small. So if we can figure out a way to stop that inward migration of that seawater.
Where is the evidence that there won't be this geographic increase in the
That's a
footprint?
valid question.
I guess that's...
Think about the quantity of water that we're going to extract. We're going to extract 28,000 acre-feet of water. That's a lot of water. Okay? We're going to create a large pumping depression in this part of the world.
The bowl.
A bowl. We're going to induce flow to move this way, and we're going to induce flow to move in this way. We're going to induce flow to come in this way.
Right.
Into that bowl. Okay? So we're going to have hydraulic control on what goes there via that well field. There's going to be such a depression there at 28,000 acre-feet a year that groundwater is going to move towards that well field.
So even fresh groundwater from inside?
Let's be careful, even the brackish groundwater, which is what we have behind it,
Well, no,
is coming there.
you drew a line all the way up there. You said fresh water is going to come from...
Yes, so
right?
fresher water
Fresher is going to come,
here.
yeah. So as that water comes, but
well.
isn't that water that is helping to hold this whole front back?
Yes, in a perfect world. But what we're saying is, this is a management decision for the GSA to decide. Going forward, do you want to leave it stagnant, leave it the way it is, and just do what we're doing right now? Do you want to push it back and push it offshore? That's a totally different management strategy. This is the third different strategy. This is saying, turn the coin over, look at the other side. We need new water sources. We need to control the seawater intrusion out there. We can accomplish both of those with an extraction barrier type well field that we can't do with an injection barrier well field.
I appreciate what you just said there, but my question was, if you're pulling in this fresher water,
Right.
Isn't that fresher water one of the things that's helping to be the barrier?
Mike Solomon, United Water. I think what Tony was trying to make the point of earlier is this management, we don't have enough water to push the seawater out. That's if we do all the things we want to do and we want to continue farming and cities, there's not enough water to push the seawater out. So what this strategy says is we accept the seawater as where it's at, but we don't let it go in any further, and we just use it where it's at. So that it basically says we give up. We're not going to push it back because we'll never have enough water to be successful going out. So let's accept this as the strategy and utilize it.
But my question is, where's the evidence that it won't cause a geographic increase in the footprint if you're decreasing, if you're having fresh water flow down that used to, you're right, there may not be enough water to push it out, but I mean, the whole idea, why don't we let everybody pump water out of the Oxmoor Plain now, because we don't want that to drop.
Yeah, I think
so
that...
where is the evidence?
All right, hold on a second. Yeah. I think let's go back. There are really three possibilities. One, you have such a filled aquifer up at the forebay that you keep this head pressure and everything stays static. That's option one. That's a function of the rain and United's ability to divert water. Option two, which United looked at about 8, 9 years ago was to create an injection barrier and essentially pump water, and the only water we could pump in at that point would have been the same water that we have from the forebay, and create a mound. That mound would act as a barrier so the salt water wouldn't come in, and part of that water that you mound is flowing into the salt water, and part of it is flowing into the fresh water. The third option, and this is the option that Tony came up with, is that because of the signature that it's a variable front line and not a constant front line, we could create a pumping depression, a controlled pumping depression in that area, which causes the water not to have the ability to go inland, but to be sucked into a hole. And your last question was, why don't we then have pumping all over the Oxnard Plain? The problem with that is we create the pumping depression farther inland, and it will draw this water in.
Well, so I'll withdraw that, but I'm still saying, I mean, I was only saying, we're taking water and we're bringing it down from the Oxnard Plain. And that water has been at least part of the contribution to trying to hold this area. So if you have less water because it's flowing to the depression, how do you still have the same front? How do you hold this geographic area?
Okay, so you're not going to have less water moving from the forebay down. That's a function of whatever United can divert and spread, and whatever the precipitation looks like there. Okay, so you're still going to have that in play. Okay, what you are going to have is on the PTP system reduced groundwater pumping in that area, because we've got in lieu deliveries of this water to that area. So we're working that side of it to raise water levels from that perspective. We're going to raise water levels in addition because we're injecting water there as well. So we're working the system from both sides. We're going to lower it on the coast, okay, to try to keep the seawater intrusion as close to the coast as we can, and we're going to raise it slowly over time inland so that we keep that head
gradient
on it. So we got a dual approach going to try to maintain the seawater intrusion.
I'll leave it that I would sure like to see more evidence about how you
Sure.
not have the geographical expansion. Very appreciative of hearing about it. A lot of this sounds really good, but that's the $64,000 question. If we're going to cause a geographic expansion in saltwater intrusion, then it has a different analysis than if we in fact can hold it. I'm not quite there, but I won't take everybody's time with asking.
It's a
more about
management
that.
decision. It's a groundwater policy.
Yeah, and I think
management decision.
I think your last comment, the takeaway, Tony, out of this is that when you make this presentation, at least in Director Bennett's area, the way he looks at it, we need to make sure people understand this question and what the potential results are, so that, and that's probably the message. It's just
Certainly.
when we deal with this in more detail. This is a scoping exercise that United is entailed right now,
Right.
and this is probably the first real public presentation of this detail, other than at the United board meeting. But
It's been presented to Cayugas as well. They
Cayugas, well, that's
requested a
good. Yeah,
presentation
yeah.
on it, so.
I think the key for all of those in the audience is that this concept will not work unless whatever water is produced is offset by reduced pumping. If the water that's produced is used to expand pumping, then we haven't gained anything in the process. And for folks to be able to buy and motivate them to take $1,000 acre-foot water, we're going to have to figure out a way to subsidize that water to bring its cost down, so we can say to that individual, if we subsidize the water that we deliver to you in the PTP or whatever it is subsidized by the community, you can't pump that equal amount of water out and expand your pumping. And the message to the community is, and it goes with what Jurgen and others have talked about, is that's what the basin replenishment fee has to pay for. Collectively, those individuals that are not on the PTP system or the PV system may have to contribute to the overall pie to help offset that cost from $1,200 an acre foot down to something that's functional that'll get people to take that water. So in his one little slide there, he talked that the agencies involved, United and the GMA and others, there's going to be a lot of negotiation And everybody needs to understand that everybody's going to be playing in this to generate the kind of dollar amount that we need to generate the water that is off-river, not dependent upon the river, that may in fact create a pumping depression that we can control, put that water to beneficial use, and help offset some of that cost so that growers can afford, and cities or whatever can afford to actually use it. So it's a very complicated issue. I mean, this is just one portion of it, but the GMA and United, GMA in particular, and its ability to raise funds, unless United has a way of raising funds, and it does, that will be the balancing act as we go forward. But ultimately, whatever water we produce has to offset water that we couldn't get any other way, and the water that we can get from other areas, i.e. the river, need to continually fill the forebay up and stop those depressions so that we have a continuous head pressure against the seawater intrusion. It's going to be a lot of work. Mike.
Mr. Chairman, to carry on Supervisor Bennett's thing, Tony, could you go back to your analysis page that was in the early of seawater versus brackish water versus fresh? You had a very first almost. Yeah, that I think go one more further forward rather than backwards.
This way?
You went past it just a second ago, I think.
Is it a table or a graphic?
No, it's a table.
Table.
There you go, stop.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, this is Chem 5 quantitative analysis all over. It's a simple version of it. But seawater is 30,000 parts per million, a majority of which is sodium chloride. Is that not true?
Correct.
Okay, so if you're using water that is 3,000, that's 1/10 seawater, which means it's 9/10 fresh. That's your composite. So if you produce 20,000 acre feet of, or use 28,000 acre feet of feedstock, 90% of that is fresh water, and 10% of it came from the ocean. And I think that's basically what Supervisor Bennett was attempting to point out, that you're going to have to replenish backfeed on the fresh side 90% of whatever you extract at those wells.
It depends on your perspective.
Pardon?
The feedstock you're talking about is already a blend. There's no way to separate
That's
it.
what I'm quoting you.
There's no way to separate
It's a
it.
blend because you're saying your feedstock is going to be 3,200 parts, right?
Something between 3,200 and 4,800.
And if that was pure seawater, it'd be 30,000.
Correct. In TDS, yes.
Pardon?
In TDS. Okay. We're talking about TDS is 6,000, let's call it.
Well,
10,000.
unless I'm reading a different book than you read, the 30,000 was stated to be primarily sodium chloride in ocean seawater.
Not a point for discussion today, but okay.
I mean, I would love to have a different text read to me because I did this, one whole day one time just to find out what the hell was going on. All right, but my point is, whatever the blend is, the other portion came from a freshwater source, or it wouldn't blend that water down. So yes, it's a blended, but exactly, that fresh water is being pushed, and not from the forebay because you have faults that prevent the water from the forebay from making it to this area. Is that not true?
A fault?
Multiple faults, I was under the impression.
Not so much in the upper system, no.
So the upper system has no fault between the forebay and
There
there.
are no identified faults in the upper system. In the lower system, that's a different animal. But in
Okay.
the upper system, which is what we're talking about today,
So this is mostly irrigation permeate, or
what is irrigation?
the water perking in from the irrigation that's being done, or what is the
The
source
recharge.
of, pardon?
The source of recharge in the forebay is precipitation, one, and United's ability to divert off the Santa Clara River is the second.
No, I'm talking about if you went a mile inland from your proposed site, the total source of the fresh water at that mile inland,
It's recharge,
and the recharge came from, by what point?
primarily the forebay. Primarily the forebay. If you look at the groundwater flow path, that's the origin of that upper system waters there.
Okay, well, I stand corrected on that one if that's true. Okay, one last question I would have then. Of those impacted local wells, and I think Chairman Mulhart, you might be more appropriate to this, the thing was that the impacted nearby landowner would be, his choice could be to get onto the pipeline and receive the new water that you're making. Are you going to hold him harmless by...
I think we got to be careful. We're at the 1 yard line heading towards the other end of the football field, okay?
But I think this is what's causing some apprehension out there.
And I know it causes apprehension, but these issues, as we educate, as United educates folks, as we begin discussing it, these issues will come up, and before United, the board commits to the kinds of things it's going to have to commit to make this thing functional. These issues, your issue, the issue you now just raised, and others, we're going to have to put this into the mix and make sure we have a solution to it.
Correct.
That's what we're doing essentially in this scoping process right now.
But you need to make some sort of, at least a philosophical basis that you're going to make that impacted owner, make him whole.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question you're going to have to do something like that. What the mechanism is, I mean, if you destroy a guy's well because you do the pumping depression and more salt water comes in, so it's non-functional, that's not a sustainable state for that individual, and you can't do that. So there'll be some solution. I don't know what that solution is yet. That's all I'm telling you. And I don't think Tony's in a position to tell you what that solution is, but we're aware we're going to have to deal with that.
Again, we're a stakeholder comment period. We're talking to people and presenting the project and laying out some of the general concepts associated with it and getting feedback. That's where we're at.
But an acceptable solution, I don't think, was asking him to pay $1,000 a foot for his own water.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And I think the answer to that is there has to be a basin replenishment fee component of this. So if that cost spread out, because this benefits all of us, because we're bringing in an additional 20,000 acre feet into the system. The problem is that you can't take and run itty-bitty little pipelines all over the place and give one guy his 5 acre foot component of it. I mean, the cost would be astronomical. So you have to go with the systems you have currently in place. PV is a possibility. PTP is a possibility. United's looking at possibly replumbing that because it wasn't built to run south to north. It was built to run north to south because of the way the pipes choke down. So we're going to have to look at that. So there's a lot of components into this. But one of the components, and we need to say it out loud so that there are no surprises, there's going to have to be a basin-wide pump fee that's paid into a pot to help offset the cost to make the actual water that is used by a grower in lieu of pumping is offset so it's usable. If you don't put those two components in there, no one is going to build a project and say, yeah, I'll sign up for $1,000 water, and when he says I can pump my own well. I mean, that just doesn't make sense at all. That's not going to happen. So, Tony, yeah.
If I could, I just want to offer this. I mean, I appreciate you're at the 1 yard line. I'm certainly not saying, hey, all the answers have to be there. In the spirit of, if this could be made to work as the theory is laid out, it's great. All right. If it could be made to work that way, I would just offer that the fundamental question that I think I'm raising, that I think you're going to find as it goes forward, in the interest of having you know about it so that you can do it, and that is, if you're going to create a depression that you admit is going to draw more salt water in, then the burden is going to be upon whoever wants to create that depression to prove that it's not going to cause saltwater intrusion in the Fox Canyon aquifer to get worse, right? And an answer that it's just a management decision isn't going to meet that requirement, that burden. So I would just offer that hurdle still remains in front of you, and maybe you need more time, more information, or whatever.
To stay on that same analogy, that's probably a 40-yard line question.
Yeah, yeah. But if it's not answered properly, it seems like it flies completely in the face of the mission. So, all right.
Any other directors? John is here. Dave, do you have any questions? Okay. Charlotte? Yeah. No. I mean, I'm moving it up to the public.
John Matthews from Onset. I just want the board, just say, I think you got to be cautious. This is an informational item.
Yes.
And you guys are starting to talk about, well, we can do it here, we can do it there, we can add a groundwater fee in that. And for the personal individual sitting in the audience, it's an informational item. It's not an item for discussion as far as I'm concerned. I'm the Brown Act.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Hi, I'm Steve Nash, Oxnard. And hi, Chairman and board members. And I understand that this is at the informational stage, 1 yard line. But I do want to, start the discussion on maybe how, and I'm sure they've already talked, United has been in discussions with Oxnard. But from my perspective, absolutely build a facility next to the AWPF. Start outreach to the groups, working to implement an Ormond Beach wetlands plan. That's very important. Absolutely compatible and complementary with everything Oxnard is trying to do, and I'm sure that has been part of the process. I would advocate exploring the possibility of covering the United's recharge basins with solar panels, as Oxnard is certainly we're interested in not increasing the load demand that might further justify non-new coastal energy facilities on our beaches. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any comments? Okay, it is an informational item, and but we had a discussion. I think it was okay. We didn't make any decisions. We just talked about issues.
You have informational items, so you can ask questions.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
I'm sorry.
Anybody else have any questions on this item? All right. Let's
Move
go to
receive and file.
Okay.
Second.
Receive and file. Second. Informational item. Let's do a roll call. I guess I got to do roll calls on all these things. No? Do I need to do a roll call?
No.
Okay. Hear any objection? Hearing none. So moved. Let's go to action items number 3.
Good afternoon again, board members, Chair Mulhart, members of the audience, Gerhard Hubner again. I'll be presenting this item. This is item number 3. So as we've stated in the past, this is our long-term management issue looking to address solutions, so to create a list of possible solutions with advantages and disadvantages for our issues and problems for developing measures to assure sustainable groundwater management. This is just a reminder that, or if you recall, back in April we started this process, and the goal, of course, was to identify some of the major issues and relevant information about those issues and problems and develop recommended solutions. So we had 4 basic steps, if you recall. I've put in red where we're at today, and that is the listing of advantages and disadvantages for each potential solution. There's been a series of actions by your board starting in May of last year, continuing through the summer, continuing into the fall, with the last action, I put that in red for you, that was your board adopted at your December 10th meeting, the revised list of proposed solutions, including a priority ranking table. So where are we at today? Today we're proceeding with the next step, returning with a list of possible solutions with advantages and disadvantages. That's included for you as item 3A. As you can see, we've converted the previous table format, which was in a landscape format, now to an 11.5 by 8.5 by 11 sheets. Some are 1 or 2 pages, depending on the list. Created the column with the potential solutions, and we've attempted to identify as many advantages, and then on the other flip side of the column, the disadvantages. So imagine for staff, this was a little bit of an interesting exercise, sort of putting ideas on one side and then essentially arguing with yourself on the other side. So we've attempted to do our best, and that's what you see before us in item number 3A. We've also taken the table, we've based on what the adopted recommended action was in December, included that as 3B as a reminder of the priority ranking table. I do want to make there is one correction. If you look on category I-1, so it's supposed to state board composition, not compensation. You know you don't receive any compensation unless... So I just want to jump into two quick examples, and then I'll conclude my remarks. So this, and I've just included these as examples. I could have included any of these. But this one is D1. This is our best management objective, or what we call our BMOs. So again, the potential solutions are the same solutions that your board saw, as well as the stakeholders saw. So that has not changed. And we've created advantages and disadvantages on each side. Essentially, many of them you'll see from doing no action, which is essentially the status quo. We tried to identify if there was a level of effort or cost savings with each potential advantage and disadvantage. And so that's sort of the balancing argument you'll see on both sides. Same, I've included this. This is G1. This is a replenishment fee discussion. So we've identified previously whether we should seek additional authority against these solutions, what that would do in terms of the agency's ability to fund some potential supply side activities, and what are some of the things it would take to embark down that. So you can see, again, in each of the solutions, we've tried to identify potential advantages or disadvantages for each solution. So today's recommendation is that you consider the approval to release this list of possible solutions with the draft advantages and disadvantages for each of the solutions. Release that to the stakeholder group for a 3-week public review and input period. So if we were to get this out tomorrow, that would be approximately the 18th, or if it was Friday, it'd be the 19th. I just want to bring to your attention that because of the February meeting, that will be pretty close, so we'll be getting those comments and providing them to you. The written analysis, we'd be pretty limited in terms of our written analysis. Certainly we would take and see any comments we have and bring that to you at your February meeting. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay.
And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, members, what's your pleasure?
I think we have a tremendous amount of work ahead of us. That's my comment.
Dave?
Recommend we release this for public comment.
Okay. Mike? Okay, everybody same?
Yeah, I agree, and I want to point out I think staff has substantially increased their effort in terms of the work on this. This is the kind of comprehensive thing that I think fairly tries to capture the advantages and disadvantages of the different solutions that are out there. And just a reminder for everybody, we're going through this process so that at each step, everybody has a chance to comment, so that if when we get ready to look at something, somebody can't rush in and say, hey, you haven't, we wanted you to look at this, or we wanted this to be considered. This is the time to, so if people think that there are advantages and disadvantages that are not mentioned here in this fairly comprehensive list, now's the time for them to step up, so that we don't have that issue that came up so much when we were doing the emergency ordinance, which was there hasn't been enough time for anybody to even know you were looking at this. So hopefully people take advantage of this review period.
Okay, I'll ask for a motion here in a second. Let me just raise a question, whoever's going to make the motion. His last note down there, is it more important to you as members that you get the raw information with no analysis on the February meeting, or is it better to have them have a chance to do what they're going to do and bring it to us in the March meeting? You guys okay with that? I'm fine.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so if I can have a motion with that stipulation so that we buy some time for staff to do what staff needs to do, can I have a motion to adopt this? Who wants to do that?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, the motion and a second. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's deal with item number 4, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mulhart and directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell, and I'm here for the appeal of Ventura Water, and I believe I need to be sworn in.
Yes, let's do that.
May I have the Ventura representative as well stand at the lectern
Okay.
for the oath? Thank you.
Shauna, is Susan going to speak as well?
Susan may pitch hit if I...
She needs
Okay,
to
then
be
she needs to
sworn.
get, why don't we just get everybody sworn in? Anybody that may have possibility to testify, then we got to do this process.
Okay. Do you solemnly state that the evidence that you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, great. All right, Kathleen.
So the item is Ventura Water, City of San Buenaventura, appeal of executive officer's decision to deny request for variance from the requirement to reduce extractions under Emergency Ordinance E. In this presentation today, I will be providing you with some background information as well as the key issues. I will be skipping over the chronology that's in the staff report. The staff report was provided to you and is in your agenda packet. So, and trying to focus in on the key issues. Moving forward, background information. Ventura is operating, let's see if I can, they have 2 active wells, 2 inactive wells, and 1 destroyed well associated with their Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency account. The active wells I have put blue dots over so to show you the approximate locations of those wells. The wells are located approximately 1 mile west of the Oxnard Basin, the Forebay Basin boundary, which is approximately here. It'll show up on my next slide. And it is approximately 3.2 miles to the coast from their wells. It is located in the northern portion near the boundary. The red line is the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency boundary. And then this is the Oxnard Plain, so it's in the northern portion and near the border of the Oxnard Plain Basin. It is also north of the Santa Clara River. And the 2 active wells that they're operating extract groundwater from the lower aquifer system. So this is actually yellow in other slides, but those areas that are colored in yellow, orange, and red are areas where the potentiometric surface is below sea level. Areas colored in shades of green and blue represent areas where the potentiometric surface is above sea level. The wells that Ventura operate are right here. The water level in 2013 in the fall was minus 12 and minus 19 feet below sea level. And then if we zero in on, focus in on this area. So the open circles represent the wells where those water levels were, the data was collected in the fall of 2013. And again, it's minus 12 at this location and minus 19 in the fall of 2013. So the temporary extraction allocation assigned to Ventura was, it's calculated, it was based on a 10-year average. It was extractions reported to the agency between 2003 and 2012. Ventura has been using credits for the last 9 of 10 years, and that is from 2005 to 2013. Ventura was reminded, or we commented when reviewing their 2010 Urban Water Management Plan, that credits are not banked or stored water. It is the board at any time can decide to extinguish credits or to change the credit program. So these are not banked or stored water. We also commented, we're concerned about the fact that the urban water management plan did not have a long-term vision for the poor quality water on the east side of the city. They did not address that in their plan. So I wanted to bring those two items to your attention. So Ventura claims that the adjusted historical allocation, if allocations are reduced below that level, it is an undue hardship. Their adjusted historical allocation is 4,104 roughly acre feet per year. Their TEA is 4,826.981 acre feet per year, and then with the reductions, in 2014 with the reductions, their allocation is 4,224 acre feet. In 2015 it's 3,982 acre feet, and in 2016 it's 3,861 acre feet. And I have put for reference that in comparing this TEA to their adjusted historical allocation, that the initial 2014 level is a 3% increase over their adjusted historical allocation. The 2015 will be a 3% decrease below their adjusted historical allocation. And then in final, at 20% reduction of the TEA, it will be a 6% decrease below their adjusted historical allocation. And we do not feel that that is an undue hardship. They have requested in the original variance request, they asked for 2,000 acre feet per year additional allocation beyond their TEA of 4,826 acre feet per year. In their appeal letter, they requested a TEA set at their adjusted historical allocation with no further reductions. This is similar to what Crestview Mutual Water Company did with their variance request. And then for their third letter, it was their second appeal letter, they changed that to 1,000 acre feet per year additional allocation beyond their temporary extraction allocation. So if they go with their TEA plus 2,000 acre feet per year, that is greater than any total annual extraction ever reported to the agency by Ventura. And it is the largest volume that they have reported as extracted was in 1985 at 6,177 acre feet per year. Ventura believes that there are inconsistencies in evaluating the variances, in particular what is an appropriate demand on the aquifers. They cited that on the example of on June 25th, 2014, the board granted Abi Rafia, who is in the expansion area. It was an undeveloped parcel. They wanted to build a single-family residence. It was 4 occupants. So your board granted for the expansion area, for a well in the expansion area, 2 acre feet per year. That's a half acre foot per person per year. The undeveloped parcel was 142 acre feet, and just a reminder, it is in the expansion area. Ventura claims that granting this allocation was inconsistent and indicative of not being equitable. And they claim that they are providing less water to single-family residences, and so therefore this amount is not justifiable. But Ventura did not provide information regarding the volume of water that they provide as sole source to a single-family residence, similar customers on similar parcel sizes. So that information was not provided to us. And so we feel that this is not inconsistent. And then Ventura asserts that inconsistency is implying what is detrimental to the aquifer. On July 23, 2014, the board granted wells to pumping trough pipeline customers. There were 7 granted in July, and then an additional 2 were granted in September. These wells, and these were exceptions to Article 4 of the emergency ordinance, they replaced water that was provided by active, inactive, or destroyed wells, or water that was provided by the pumping trough pipeline United Water, and they had been receiving it during the historical allocation period. So once again, they were serving lands irrigated between 1985 and 1989. Ventura cites that the proposed extractions of 1,425 represent an increase in extractions. However, it should be noted this is their proposed extractions. That did not deduct groundwater that they had been already pumping or that was delivered to them. So this is a very high amount, and the actual increase in groundwater usage would be much, much smaller than that number. And then Ventura did not reference when they cited that associated with the parcels that would be receiving these wells and getting the water to irrigate them, there is 1,663 acre-feet of historical allocation with those applications. And that is, their initial reference was to the 7 on July 23rd. So Ventura claims there are inconsistencies in the net detriment determination for exceptions to Article 4 versus variances from Article 2 of the Emergency Ordinance E. These determinations are different. Article 4 is for exceptions for new wells. It's the new well moratorium. For new and expanded use was the concern. The pumping trough pipeline is not a new use, but there may be an increase in groundwater extractions associated with those wells. And then Article 2 is the variances to change their temporary extraction allocations. So the determinations are different. In accordance with the emergency ordinance, Article 4, the board is to find that the proposed use will result in no net detriment to the basin or any sub-basin or aquifer associated with the use by determining that the proposed use does not result in material degradation of water quality of any type, or 2, recharge to any aquifer within the agency is not materially diminished. So that is for Article 4 for the exceptions for the well permits. And then Article 2 for variances to the required reduction in extractions. The executive officer is to find that granting of such variance will result in no net detriment to the aquifer systems. So Ventura is asking for a variance to have an allocation that exceeds all annual extractions ever reported to Ventura, or annual extractions that exceed all but 2 years of reported annual extractions, 1985 and 1989, and that I believe is the 1985 reported extractions. And then the third request, and they didn't take any of these off the table, they're all out there, they would want any one of these. They stated when they submitted for the 1,000 acre-feet per year additional that they would be very grateful if you wish to give them the 2,000 acre-feet per year additional allocation. So the AHA, with no further reductions, was their third option put out on the table. So in evaluating their request, I looked at all extractions within a 1 mile radius of their wells within the agency boundaries for the year 2012 and 2013 to see, what are the other extractions in the area. In 2012, 6,535 acre-feet were extracted within this area. And then this is, right here is the boundary between the Oxnard Plain and the Oxnard Forebay. So Ventura extracted 86% of that volume that was extracted. In 2013, the total extractions from all wells within this area were 6,513 acre-feet. Ventura extracted 84% of that volume. 2,000 acre-foot increase would represent a 30% increase in the volume extracted from that area, and then a 1,000 acre-foot increase would represent a 15% increase in extractions from this area within the agency. And a reminder, we are 3.2 miles from the coast at the active well at this location, and it is 1 mile from the Oxnard forebay. Note the reductions in the potentiometric surface. There is possibly a potential that the head would be higher here, possibly a potential that the hydraulic gradient might be going towards the forebay, and possibly this area in this drought condition could be recharging the forebay. But the 1 mile radius, so this is minus 12 and minus 19. I looked up the fall of 2014 water levels, and these were collected by the City of Ventura and reported to the County of Ventura. Water levels have declined in between fall of 2013 and fall of 2014. There has been a 14-foot drop in the water level at this well, and then it has declined to minus 34 feet as of September of 2014, what used to be at 19 feet. So, per paragraph H of Article 2, are there any special circumstances? And let me go back here. So with this drop in water levels and the water levels being below sea level, there is a potential that saltwater intrusion, so a degradation of water quality, could occur by additional pumping in this area. Additionally, as far as recharge to the recharge area, forebay is identified as a recharge area. Water from this area could potentially possibly recharge the recharge area under these current drought conditions. So the criteria are that there are special circumstances or exceptional characteristics of the owner or operator which do not apply generally to comparable owners or operators in the same vicinity, or that strict application of the reductions as they apply to the owner or operator will result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships inconsistent with the general purpose of the emergency ordinance, or that granting such a variance will result in no net detriment to the aquifer systems. Agency staff believes that Ventura has not demonstrated that these conditions have been met. Agency staff recommends that Ventura's appeal be denied, that their TEA of 4,826 acre-feet should remain and be reduced per the schedule-mandated reductions in accordance with Emergency Ordinance E. And are there any questions?
Okay. Any members have any questions for staff? Okay. Thank you. Shauna.
Good afternoon. I'm Shauna Epstein, Ventura Water's General Manager. Ventura Water serves a population of 113,000 people, and I'm going to discuss with you today how we operate our water supplies and what makes us a little bit different than some of the other municipalities in this area, as well as how we've see some of the variances. So our historical allocation is 5,472. That's set up through the 1985-1989 period. And as discussed, we have been asked to reduce by 25%, so that our adjusted by 2010 was 4,104. The TEA given was 4,827, and that's giving us our baseline. And so, as asked to be reduced by January 1st, 2016, and that's how we really look at this variance request. It's an overall, what's at the end of the day, is 3,862. And so in comparing that to our original historical, It's actually asking the city to do a 29% reduction with Emergency Ordinance E, and there's not a lot of hope when we're going to be out of Emergency Ordinance E, as how we see how the ordinance is written. So up to 2005, when we had the river flowing at a pretty good place and we had all of our wells in place, we were putting credits aside because we weren't taking our full allocation from the Oxnard Plain. And so we had over 25,000 credits set aside. And this is really how we look at operating, how we functioned, is that we would take from the groundwater basins when we needed to take from the groundwater, otherwise we tried to use our other resources as we move forward. When the city is seeing different exemptions put through, and from the reports that we read, there were several wells that were allowed that had no historical allocation, those properties, and then others who the well was allowed that had less historical allocation than before. So, and then the residential well that was asked to be put in for a new home was for 2 acre-feet, and I'll demonstrate later how the city looks at how much one house, single-family house, should use. This in no way means that Ventura is not committed to conservation. Our community has really demonstrated that we are conserving. December is almost at 30% less production of water. And now that's really a tribute to cool weather and wet weather, but that we have really been reducing. So what you're looking at is our 2013 production is the red line. The blue line with dots is our 2014 production. And the little red dash line is what we'd be at 10% reduction, and the blue line dashes what would be at 20% reduction. So we are out there. We are committed to having our community, and we even have a special task force on the drought. So in 2013, the city put together an annual water comprehensive report. This report was really about not only looking at what our supply is, but how do we define our demand when we have development coming through and other things, so that we can say really how much water have we already allocated to projects that have been approved, because that was we've never really looked at how that demand and supply matches up, and we wanted to look at that and see how do we measure that. So when we put our demand factors together, we looked at our past history of what our customers are using, and we wanted to use the most current time frame, because we did want to take into effect new building codes that use less water as we move forward. So what you're looking at is how we look at a dwelling unit based on different densities. And so for a single-family home on an acre, we would be really allocating them 0.41 acre-feet according to that demand. So that's 370 gallons per day per dwelling unit. We wanted to use the exact chart that's in our comprehensive report, but that converts to 0.41 acre-feet. And it goes down as our higher densities go to 0.3 acre-feet per year. So that is how we evaluated, and that's where we came up with our numbers. And we have shared our water comprehensive report with all the related staffs here in the past. So Ventura Water, where we take our water from, this is a map that kind of shows that. And if you notice, our maps don't put our wells with our well numbers. We feel that's against the Bioterrorism Act. And so in the future, we'd prefer you to keep those private. The Casitas Municipal Water District is where we have water from Lake Casitas, and that's only the demand which we serve in that area is what we can take from that lake. The Ventura River is also a primary source, and then during dry years it's less, and wetter years it's more. And then the groundwater basins, as you can see, where we most of our groundwater basins are all in the United Water Conservation District area, and we only take we have wells also in the Santa Paula and Mound Basin, which here's all of our listed. And then we have reclaimed water as a source, so we'll talk about how that's moving forward. So potential resources, yes, we do have a 10,000 acre-foot entitlement to the state water. We have and we have not had a formal connection to that state water. We are working and having been in discussions at this point with Oxnard, Callegas, and Metropolitan Water District of how we could wheel our water through. But in this year that we just passed, that would only have been 500 acre-feet, and it could only have been moved if they had capacity at a certain time. So it's not going to be necessarily a reliable supply with a $10,000 acre-foot attached to it. And I think even in this room and other venues, it's been discussed by the Public Works Department how the Bay Delta is not necessarily a reliable supply on the long term. Even if United had chosen to purchase those 500 acre-feet, they wouldn't have moved the water because of the whole infestation of the quagga mussels, and that's unfortunate, and that's why that we can't point to you should do this and do that. There's always going to be certain circumstances at any given time. Recycled water. We have an existing reclaimed water system. It is small to this date. We are moving forward. We're also, during this drought, applying for a permit so people can truck our reclaimed water if we don't have the actual infrastructure. And so that permit application has been submitted to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. On the long run, we have special studies for our Santa Clara River estuary of what to do with the 7 to 8 million gallons of water we're putting into the estuary every day. And we have a potable reuse pilot program scheduled for April, maybe delayed a little bit, but that's where we're heading towards looking at how we use that water in potable reuse. And then we're also working with Ojai Valley Sanitation District. They have a property that we have first right of refusal to their effluent, and how can we use that water to more beneficial use. Ocean desal was something that was actually voted on in 1994 as preferable to the state water. I don't know if that's still would be true today in being cited in Ventura, but it's definitely an opportunity for us to work with other entities of trading water. And then we have significant water conservation measures coming down the pike, as well as we've been really working on all that. We're going to be proposing an incentive program to the council from the draft task force, as well as rates. And then really looking at integrated water resources as we move forward. So I think that potable reuse for us is also about improving that water quality on the east end. But we do have in our 10-year capital program a reverse osmosis treatment plant for that water on the east end. So the three findings of what are exceptional circumstances. We feel we're the only municipality that's not connected to state water and getting imported water that's at this point is really been buffered, not even by the state water, but buffered by Metropolitan's Diamond Valley Lake and having that supply and being helped out by that. And our supplies are decreasing. The Ventura River is, we're not even operating our Avenue plant on every day at this point. And the Mound Basin, because of its quality issues, we actually can't take from that basin as much if we aren't getting water from the Oxnard Plain because it helps us with blending. So that's really one of our issues. And then the Santa Paula Basin, we're working closely with United and the Santa Paula Basin Pumpers Association to make sure that basin's being run healthy, and so there could be issues with that water. And Casitas has been very firm of working with us on in-district demand, and they too are declining and may have to call for allocations as well. So we're being pinched on all sides. The reductions will result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships. We feel that we have tried to be good stewards. We've tried not to use our full allocation when the river is running well, and that this is something that we have put away credits for. And that this is when you take those credits away, then we should at least get the variance. And that's something I asked for the variance when you were approving this emergency ordinance E. So right now we're 10% Ventura water, 26% Casitas, and groundwater 64%. And 40% of that 64% is from the golf course wells, which is the Oxnard Plain. No net detriment. We feel that there's definitely what we're asking for is no any more detriment than what we've had of crops changing to more water-using crops, and that's that you've been given those deferences in this drought, and we feel that the residents of Ventura should get the same. So, other things that we'd like to make sure considered, that the highest use of water is for municipal and domestic, and we're not trying to use it rashly. We just want to be able to not be overtly penalized for things that we know that we weren't designed our system to deal with. And then we're very conscious that we don't want our allocation during this emergency to be given away to others, and then put us at a detriment for that. And then and that we really aren't using a large portion of our conservation credits. It's a small percentage if we have over 25,000. So we are asking, we lowered basically our ask because we saw that our customers were conserving and we're going to be able to make it, and we're hoping to get some other wells online, to 1,000 acre feet over our allocation, our adjusted historical. And that's about what we've been using in dry years and when the river is down. So we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Shauna. Any members have any questions? Shauna, can you go back to the slide? It's way in the front where you had the breakdown of water usage by, it's that table that you created.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Residential based on 0 to 8 DU per acre. That's a demand factor of 370 gallons per day per DU.
Dwelling unit.
Dwelling unit.
Yes.
And a dwelling unit is typically in the city of Ventura is what, 1/8 of an acre maybe, or less? I don't know. Whatever.
Well, this is the different density. So we do have a dwelling unit that could be on an acre.
Oh, okay.
And it could be one dwelling unit, or it could be 8 dwelling units on an acre. But this is the different levels of density. The reason we broke down to the levels of density is prior to this, our general plan just said per dwelling unit and didn't do it based on density. We felt this actually defined the water usage a little bit better. So this could be for 1 unit or it could be for 8 units, but that's what's being allocated per unit.
Okay, it may be hard to make a correlation here, but what I did is just in my own mind, I took the 370 gallons per day and divided it into the 2,000 gallons per day for parks, landscape, and irrigation. When you run that calculation, what I come up with, and I did it real quick because my calculator's off, I come up with a factor of over 5.3. If you run that 5.3 against the 0.41 acre feet that you said the 370 represents, I think that's what you said. It's point.
Are you trying to get convert that to acre feet for the irrigation? It's 2.24 acre feet.
Okay,
per acre.
Came up with 2.3, but okay. So what we're using I know the city of Ventura has been concerned in the past about good stewards of the water and the like. So even by your own demand factor, on irrigated land, we're irrigating parks and landscape at the rate of 2.2, 2.3 acre feet, which is comparable to what we're doing in a lot of areas in the ag community. And we're trying to, and maybe in some ways, we're trying to make apples and oranges comparison with the 1 unit per parcel, or the 370 gallons per day for dwelling unit. And you cited an example of, we gave a variance of 2 acre feet on a 146 acre parcel. So, I'm just.
But respectfully, it was made very clear, because I sat through that hearing, that was just only for their house, and this area that would just landscape right in front of the house, and it was for 4 people in a 1 bedroom, not a 1 bedroom, 4 people in a one dwelling unit house, one single family house. So it wasn't for their acreage to irrigate their land.
Yeah, well, you can't do 146 acres on 2 acre feet. But okay, that's just the comment I had. When I looked at that, and I'm glad you gave me the number. I did it up here, but 2.2 acre feet for parks, landscape, and irrigation. So, all right. Anybody, Mike?
I think at least my sentiment the day we gave that grant, that granting also includes fire protection. They have to supply their own water reserves for fire protection and everything. So unless they hauled it in with a truck, and if you'd looked at the map, it's a very remote location. So the Ventura County Fire has a requirement if they have to have their standby water, and that would have come out of that, not be in addition to it.
And our demand factors as well have a 20% fudge factor on it for all of the different storage and needs that you need on it, plus unaccounted for water of 6%. So that's so it's basically 26% more than what our actual customers are using.
Okay, let me, any other members have comments? Kathleen, Jean? All right, let me switch back to Kathleen for a second.
Could I get my presentation back up, and then I need to go back to the end slides? Let me quickly thumb through these. Okay, I looked at the annual extractions associated with the Ventura account. You'll notice the ones in bold for 2013, 2012, 2009, and 2008. This is their historical allocation, 5,471 acre-feet. These extractions reported to the agency exceed their historical allocation. The last time that they accrued conservation credits was back in 2004, so they're working on conservation credits that were earned prior to 2004. And so you can see the difference between their AHA and what they've been extracting, just for reference. And that AHA was established in 2010. If you take their numbers from their, this is taking their AHA and their TEA with the reductions, and these are the years in which those values were exceeded. So here's what they, this is their TEA with the reductions. This is with 2,000 acre-feet added. This is with 1,000 acre-feet added. So with the 2,000 acre-foot, this amount that they would be requesting was only exceeded in 1985 and 1989. And with the 1,000 added, it was exceeded 14 out of 29 years, their extractions, just for reference when we're looking at those requests. I took their chart and I converted it into acre-feet. It sounds like I may have, I don't know if there's an error. Oh, it's right here, 2.24 acre-feet per acre. So taking that 2 acre-feet per year, if you had 4 beds at the hospital, at an assisted living center, they would be granted 2.42 for those 4 people over at the assisted living facility. If you look at one dwelling unit, it's 0.4. But if you take that, and for all those homes that have widows, widowers, single adults, career-minded folks, if you take that, that would give them an allocation of 1.6 for the 4 people living at Abu Rafia, if they happen to have an addition to their family or, a gas come. So this is, I believe, 2 acre-feet is between what 4 singles living in residential development versus...
Excuse me, can you help me? So they're residential based. I don't understand how you're getting to multiply that by 4.
Okay, I am aware that in the city of Ventura, I have friends that live in single-family residences all by themselves. So this is an average value. 0.4 is averaged over all of the residences in the city. So one single resident, one person in the house would be granted an allocation of 0.4 acre-feet per year. If you take 4 single people, such as the residents at Abu Rafia, if you just use those 4 single people in the city of Ventura, and then you take it to 4 people at Abu Rafia, the city would have given those 4 people a total of 1.6 acre-feet.
Thank you. Excuse me. And Shauna, do you agree or disagree with that?
That's not how we use the calculation. So we use it per dwelling unit. So we calculate with the assumption of an average. And so that's not how we
Okay. Included in that average, though, would be one person in a single-family residence.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
But if you look at per bed, 4 people in the per bed average, it comes out to 2.4 acre feet.
Okay.
And then interesting to note that if you have 9 to 20 dwelling units per acre, it's over 8 acre feet per acre. But, and then this is the PTP area. They were citing that this was all used for agricultural during the historical allocation period, and then those were the 2 other applications. Okay. So
Okay.
thank you very much.
Okay. Shauna, did you want to, any additional comments?
We use a 2.6 factor of when we gave you those per acre feet of, and what's in a dwelling unit, that's what's in our general plan. And hospitals are notorious for using way more water per person than a home, and for good reason.
Okay. All right. Al, this is an appeal process. This is not a public comment kind of issue, is it? Yes or no?
Well, it is a public hearing, so if there's anyone present who wishes to speak either in favor of or opposed to the appeal, they may do so.
Okay. Do we have to swear them in as well?
Not if they're just expressing their position one way or the other. No.
All right. With that, is there anybody that has any comments they'd like to make? Okay. Then the next sequence, should we close the public hearing and have our discussion? Am I correct?
Yes, the item would return to your board for discussion.
Okay.
And if it's helpful, just to provide guidance on that, this appeal is made pursuant to Chapter 6 of the Ordinance Code, which requires your board to act equitably on the appeal, which means to decide the issue based on what is just, right, and fair under all of the circumstances. And those circumstances may include any factor that your board considers relevant to the issue. And as was set forth in both presentations, there are 2 grounds being presented for the appeal as set forth in Emergency Ordinance E, which are that a strict application of the pumping reductions would result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship, inconsistent with the general purpose of the ordinance, which, as a reminder, was to achieve a agency-wide 20% reduction in pumping. The other ground for the appeal presented was that granting the variance will not result in a net detriment to the aquifer systems. A finding of either of those grounds would be sufficient to support the appeal.
Okay. All right. With that, let me close the public hearing process. And folks, who would like to go first?
I'll start. I appreciate all the work that went into both of the presentations. It helps me. As I've said, I think several times, I'm not a visionary, so you can write down all the words, and it's hard for me to imagine all of the places that the maps showed, and so that helped me a lot. But the one thing I do vision is that if we approve this, we're going to have a long line of every single M&I person out here with an application explaining how they are different in all of their needs and their wants and their druthers, and how they need to also have an exemption. And I think that any action you take, you have to look at what you're setting yourself up for in the future. And I'm inclined to say that we did something. We told all the M&I users that they were going to have to reduce, and I think we're just going to have to stick to it.
Okay. Who else? Dave? I just alternate.
I think Charlotte says it well, so I don't have anything to add to that.
Steve?
I think the city of Ventura has articulated a good case from the standpoint of we made other exceptions. And, you can sit there and try to go, well, it's 2 acre feet, but we made other exceptions and, the pumping pipeline. And when we did that, and I questioned at the time, we said, well, we're trying to get everybody into the same spot so that then everybody cuts from the same spot. The M&I doesn't quite fall into that, that category because they got into the spot faster. But I think that I very much appreciate what Charlotte said, is where do you draw the line? But I think I'd like to use this moment to remind us that the earlier exceptions that we made are now being used today to justify a well-articulated presentation by the city of Ventura. That on its surface, you'd say, hey, there's they make some good points, but it's for me why I was very concerned about the original exceptions that we made. So I don't know how to get around that from here. Am I ready to say this is undue hardship? That I think if this drought continues, these kind of cutbacks are going to be made by M&I around, and the city of Ventura has already made some substantial efforts, as they've demonstrated here. There will be more that'll have to be made. I think it's a difficult issue for the city of Ventura, but I wouldn't be ready to grant another exception for the very reason here. But if we have other ag exceptions coming forward, we should be ready to defend them, or ready to carefully consider that M&I will use those to justify a request.
Okay, Mike?
The exceptions that we did for ag were people who had their entire supply taken away from them. I think that's quite different than their supply being reduced. So I really don't think the analogy was correct.
I think it's important that we read what the instructions are, and the instructions are basically the rules we wrote when we adopted these things, and that's what I'm reading. I've listened to Shauna, the city of Ventura's case, and I think you did an excellent job. I mean, it's the city of Ventura is doing what we want all the cities to do, and I understand the bind. I think staff made a great presentation, and hence we have the dilemma. So the only way I can resolve this issue is I got to read what it says. It says there are special circumstances or exceptional characteristics of the owner or operator which do not apply generally to comparable owners or operators in the same vicinity. I find that that item does not apply. The cities have argued that they're not M&I operators, that ag and M&I are, I mean, we've gone through that. So we got to compare cities with cities. To me, that's where comparable owners and operators are, not, and I don't find that the circumstances or exceptional characteristics are applicable. Item 2 says the strict application of the direction as they apply to the owner operator result in a practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships inconsistent with the general purpose of the emergency ordinance. The general purpose of the emergency ordinance is to reduce pumping. I don't find that the application of the reductions results in a practical deficit or unnecessary hardships. Yes, it's going to be hard because it's hard on all of us, but I don't find it in some unique category that's not applicable across the board. That the granting of such variance will result in no net detriment to the aquifer, and I think the numbers themselves show that the flow of the way the water is, as staff has showed, that one does not apply. So in terms of, and I think it was important that you pointed out that there was a certain amount of water that was delivered via surface deliveries that offset their groundwater pumping, because that's what the agreement of the PTP was. We now are in a situation where there is no groundwater surface deliveries. The quagga mussel issue is a very serious issue, and it's serious enough that PV and United are looking at alternatives to how to treat that, similar to Indio and others. And we've said at United, and we've said to PV, and they've agreed, this year there's probably no deliveries to PV. That is a practical hardship, but it's the only thing we can do. The flip side of the quagga mussel is they don't live in the ground. So groundwater pumping will not put quagga mussels inside the city of Oxnard or Ventura or any city, unless the fire department takes it out of the river and squirts it all over the place, then they'll die. I don't know. So as I read through this criteria, it's the same criteria that we've applied for other individuals, and it's going to be the same criteria we're going to apply going forward. And I don't think, based on what I've heard, that the city of Ventura has met the exemptions in any of these criteria, and therefore I would not support the granting of a waiver. Okay? So I think we've all spoken. Motion? Somebody motion?
Move to deny the appeal.
And a second? Somebody?
Second.
Let's have a roll call.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on to item number 5, right? Yeah. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Kathleen, haven't seen you in a while.
Chairman Mulhart and directors. And then once again, my name is Kathleen Rydell. I'm here to present item 5. Application for permit to construct an exception from temporary prohibition on new well for property located at 2020 East Woolley Road, Oxnard. Raymond and Maria Hernandez, owners, Sundance Berry Farms, the operator. This is a property that was receiving pumping trough pipeline water from United Water Conservation District. That water was a blend of both surface water and groundwater. They do have an on-site well, and so just going back, emergency ordinance E was adopted on April 11th, 2014, and it imposes a temporary moratorium on extraction facilities, and the board may grant exceptions to the moratorium on a case-by-case basis. So this is not a new proposed use of water. This land was irrigated since 1945. This is the location of the parcel that they would like to have the well to irrigate. And then you can see the pumping trough pipeline outlined in blue. It is in the Oxnard Plain Basin, the central portion of the basin. For reference, the 101 freeway, Camarillo Airport, basin boundary down here. This is the Pleasant Valley Basin. This is a 1945 aerial photograph. This is a parcel outlined in yellow. The parcel in 1984, still used for agriculture. It has some other facilities, 3 little facilities on it, but there it is, agriculture 1984. 1989, once again, agricultural operation on the parcel. So it was irrigated during the historical allocation period. And then there is the one on-site well. It's circled, a green circle. The well is within that circle, the approximate location of the well. And the proposed well location is its green dot. So looking at the potentiometric surface for the upper aquifer system, water levels range from about 4 feet above to 15 feet below sea level within the upper aquifer system area of the pumping trough pipeline. So it ranges from +4 to -15. In the lower aquifer system, water levels range from -50 to -120 feet below sea level. And here is the parcel right on the line of 60 feet below sea level. So applications for exception to the moratorium on well permit shall be conform to the requirements of section 5.2.2.3 of the agency ordinance code, and the board shall make its findings based on section 5.2.2.4. I have provided an analysis of these sections of 5.2.2.3 in the staff report. So I would just refer you over to the analysis in the staff report. This is a table within the staff report. Looking at the proposed use, they're proposing, I believe it's 24 acres of strawberries is what they would like to grow. So if you look at their past groundwater deliveries within the last 5 years and the irrigation allowance that would be allowed, they proposed 55 acre feet. They have been the greatest groundwater delivery within the last 5 years, 2009 to 2013. Was 53.59 acre feet. The difference would be an increase in groundwater extractions for that single crop of strawberries on the order of 6.4 acre feet. So that is the increase. And once again, this is not a new use of water. It's just an increase in groundwater use potential if they continue with the strawberries as they propose. So per section 5.2.4, the board may approve the proposed use if, after a public hearing, it finds that the proposed use will result in no net detriment to the basin or aquifers associated with the use by determining that either the proposed use does not result in material degradation of water quality of any type or recharge to any aquifer within the agency is not materially diminished. Any further pumping within the Oxnard Plain has the potential to cause degradation of water quality along the coastline with saltwater intrusion. However, the proposed site is within the central portion of the Oxnard Plain Basin, and the impact should be negligible on recharge to the aquifer systems. In granting the approval, the board may impose any conditions that may be appropriate. In the board letter are the proposed conditions. And then quickly, unless you want me to go through these are in the staff report. These are the same as the other conditions placed on other PTP wells, replacement wells, that the board has considered in July and September. So, in conclusion, the parcel was irrigated during the historical allocation-based period, and staff recommends an exception to the emergency ordinance E, Article 4, drilling moratorium be granted with permit conditions. So, thank you.
Okay. And we have to do a public hearing on this issue. Is that correct?
Can I ask a question of Kathleen?
Do we ask questions before or after the?
You can ask the question before the hearing.
Kathleen, could you go back to that chart you had up? Shows the
Table 1?
Table with the use versus what the IAI could be. Yeah. It impresses me that if this person was irrigating with 55 acre feet in drought conditions, given a regular year, which perhaps we're going to receive this year, it's more likely they will use less, not more. Even though their allocation would change to an IAI allocation method, just because it's available doesn't necessarily automatically mean it'll be used.
Item 5A in the staff report has the PTP deliveries, and it has total deliveries, and then total groundwater delivered was provided. This is a table that was provided by United Water Conservation District, so that you can see that they did use 87, 83, 89, 96 acre feet in the past. However, their greatest groundwater delivery was 53.59 acre feet in 2013.
Okay, so at some point they made a drastic cut in water use. down from 80s down to 55, it appears.
Well, they suggested with their application that they were willing to cut back on their water use. They were requesting 55 acre feet. However, if they do grow their strawberries, given the irrigation allowance index, the singles crop would, if they went to the full amount, it calculates out to 60 acre feet per year.
Yeah, I understand that logic if, but my statement I think still remains true.
Okay.
If they were using in the 80s, and in recent years they managed to cut water use down into the 53, 55 range during exceptional drought years, if we had a regular rain year, I would say to you it likely would mean they would use less, not more.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything? Open up to the public. Anybody have any comments? Robert.
Robert Ronio with Crestview Mutual Water Company. I guess I've got a statement and then I've got a question. First off, statement, I'm going to be very interested to see how you quantify that no net detriment is going to be happening here if you approve this. Crestview was required when we appealed or when we requested in order to shift some pumping to do a new no net detriment analysis. And we provided that and staff approved it. And then when it came up for the appeal, it was cited that I could not prove no net detriment and my appeal was denied. I'll be very interested to see how you craft your way through this as you have in the past and proving these, that no net detriment can be found. Second of all, I guess the question is, why is this being considered when the PTP system is still online? Our wells are still pumping over from United. We've got water. Why are we considering this? That system's not down. Thank you.
Okay, that to me is interesting. We are pumping our own wells into the manifold. The water tables have come up to the bottom of those. If that's true, I didn't know that.
We've actually never.
Oh no, I'm sorry. In the PTP system.
PTP.
Okay. Yeah. PTP.
Yeah.
Okay, I got myself confused. Yeah. Okay. If you look at anybody else have any comments? Anybody want to say anything?
I have a question. But,
Yeah.
Are the people here who are requesting this, are they going to talk?
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Murray with Sundance Berry Farms, and we're the tenant on this property. A couple points I'd like to make to clarify. We talked that there was an existing well on the property. Just so we're clear, that's a well that currently produces 5 gallons per minute. So obviously given the agricultural needs that we have on this parcel, that's not going to be sufficient. If necessary, if you were to require it, we could destroy that well to make this new source the sole source on the property.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else in the audience? All right. I'm looking at the proposed permit conditions, the groundwater wells to be registered with the GMA, operation. There's a whole bunch of things in here, and that is consistent with what we did before. And the last item, it says, when water supply is returned to the pumping trough pipeline, extractions from the subject well are to be replaced with water from the pumping trough pipeline per the existing agreement with United. So I know the wells you're talking about now, Bob. If we're delivering water to that property, then by this agreement, they have to stop pumping on that property, in which case that well just sits idle. It's a huge investment, and now it sits idle. So
that is the same restriction we applied to.
Yeah, it's the same restriction. Yeah,
they cannot pump it double pump.
The original, when we originally built the PTP, it was the PTP will take care of all your water supplies and you'll surrender your well, or effectively surrender your well. And I don't think we all envisioned the dilemma we're in now. So I guess the answer to the question that Robert raised about if they determine that there is enough water supply from the PTP and they're willing to live with that supply, why would you spend the money to go out and put a new well in, given the fact that if and when it rains and we have additional water in the PTP, that well essentially sits idle. And you've got a pretty expensive big well putting out a lot more than 5 gallons a minute for whatever that operation is, if it's dust control or whatever. So it's kind of a catch-22. If you don't have the PTP water, you need it. If you have the PT water and you build it, you can't use it, not for that level of irrigation. And that's a business decision more than anything else. And I think that's the only way we can, it's kind of a rhetorical question. Why would they need a well if they got PTP water? Well, the answer is, I don't know. And that's business decisions they would have to make. The bigger question that Robert raised was this issue of node net detriment. And if I recall, we used that same logic for the previous wells that we approved. And you want to speak to that again? You covered that. We need to address that issue.
Okay. The two, per section 5.2.2.4, the proposed use does not result in material degradation of water quality of any type. Lowering the water table within the Oxnard Plain reduces the water that's pushing off saltwater intrusion, and therefore, by reducing the water, even at 6.41 acre feet, would in cumulative cause water quality degradation along the coastline. So we cannot say that water quality would not deteriorate. However, because recharge to any aquifer within the agency is not materially diminished, our recharge zone is in the forebay, and therefore this being in the central portion of the Oxnard Plain, it's not reducing recharge in the main recharge area. So the impact to recharge is negligible.
And the way that is reading is it's an or statement.
Yes.
There's 3 or statements.
No, it's 2.
There's 3. No net detriment to the basin, or the aquifer associated with the basin by terming that either, and those are 2 ors.
Oh.
Am I reading that correctly? So
Yes,
you
I
worked
do
through
see
the
the
first
other
paragraph. You worked through the first paragraph, and that was the issue that Robert raised. No net detriment to the basin, or the aquifer associated with the use by determining that either, and then another or, and the last or is the one that does not apply, or that applies rather.
That's correct.
And that's how staff came to this conclusion. It would seem to me that's the same logic we used on the previous ones. I don't recall that discussion in detail, but that's the only way we would get there.
If the directors would allow me, I'll remind you of the argument that I made back when we approved those 7. I think we had 7 at one time.
And then 2 more.
Yeah, and the concept that I raised was that these were lands that were being served by groundwater initially. They went off groundwater and received PTP water to benefit the basin in that area. PTP water became unavailable, and so those property owners at that point had no source of water. And yet they had a historical use. This wasn't new use. It was either a rehabbing of wells that had been gone dormant, or it was that concept. And so that was the concept that everybody bought into at the time, was the idea that this wasn't new use. It was just use coming from a different place. And it wasn't reduced use. It was the prospect of having zero water. Now, in terms of this property owner, I don't want to hazard a guess, but given all the fluctuation in the local water business, I would presume they are willing to spend the money on sinking a well just precisely for the idea of backup, emergency source. And I think we allow that in our ordinance, that, backup and emergency source wells are allowed. So if in fact PTP water is available, I believe, as you said it, they should be required to take that PTP water.
And that's what's in the conditions.
Yeah. And if not, when it becomes unavailable and they have their well ready to use, they don't lose a source of water and a source of income from the property.
Okay. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, I think one of the alternatives could be that if you wanted, you could go ahead and close the existing well you have, since it's, what, a 5-gallon a minute now. That's going to help no one. And we could reclassify this as a replacement on whatever volume that well previously produced during its production period. Obviously being idled as long as it's lost its ability because it was using replacement water. But indeed, if you went back to the period it was actively irrigating that particular parcel, then its production record would be applicable to a replacement well. But I don't think we need to do that, sure, domino trading. I mean, this is certainly a piece of property that, as I said with the others, I mean, as many years as I can remember, and certainly, Chairman, your memory probably remembers it better than me, this parcel has never been not farmed. So that's my opinion.
What do you folks want to do?
I would move that we approve the application per the restrictions, or the, what do you call the conditions listed in our packet by staff.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Let me ask on the motion in the second. You had raised, should we stipulate that they also abandon the smaller well?
Oh, that was an offer made by the applicant. I really think for the benefit of the aquifer, any well that's not being actively used, that's in disrepair, should be closed because they pose a potential problem in some point in the future. I think Sam McIntyre is sitting in the back with a good, strong memory of having to find some wells that had never been closed, and it caused undue hardship sort of at a point.
Would you?
I would amend the motion to include the destruction of the existing well.
So the motion would be amended to include item 11, which is unique to this applicant.
And does that remain acceptable to you, please?
I apologize, Chairman Hart. Is this hearing now closed and up for the motion?
No. Let me just do it.
Are we okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Let me hear.
So just to clarify on the small domestic well, it never was used. I'm not positive if there was an additional well at some point in time on that property that maybe was destroyed, but this is a very, very small domestic well, a couple inches in diameter.
So 6-inch well or something?
Yeah, maybe even smaller, but it's 5 gallons a minute. There was no way that was ever used to irrigate the entire
my
parcel.
misinterpretation then. I thought it was a previously production well that had gone bad.
But the motion would still be to abandon that.
Yeah, our preference obviously would be to keep it because it's a good domestic well, but if that was what it took to do
Are you using it for potable source now for your work crew or something?
We're using it for a house that's located on the property.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my statement.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, let me...
well, then let me re-amend the motion also, that if it's currently being used for a dwelling, then I think we allow that.
Okay.
My point was
We need to
withdrawing
close the public hearing.
that we don't want to make him close his domestic well. That's not appropriate.
Hold on, let me do this in sequence. Okay, public hearing is closed. Steve.
If I could just ask staff here, this, the question about no net detriment, and then, so there's a small well there now. Did this property abandon their well to go onto the pumping trough pipeline?
When we review the aerial photos and the locations of known wells, there is only one well associated with this parcel, and it is a small domestic well that's producing, and they're reporting 1.6, it averages out to 1.6 acre feet per year.
So this isn't somebody who abandoned their well to go onto the pumping trough pipeline?
They have been receiving pumping trough pipeline water since 1987.
Right.
So it would be possibly an adjacent parcel that supplied water to this parcel.
Yeah, we got to be careful here. Yeah. It's always been in production. I mean, it's prime ground. It's been in production.
I showed you the 1945 aerial photograph.
Yeah. Well, and to make it a little more clear for Director Bennett, it's a pretty common situation out there for there to be multiple parcels run and operated by one owner, and then there might be a death of the patriarch, and it might be divided. But still, they might have received water from the other parcel next door.
So it fits in the category of the last 7 in that they were pumping water. Pumped water was being used for this
That's the way to
property.
say it.
I would say that's correct.
And then it switched over, when they switched over the pumping trough pipeline, it just didn't come from the well on that particular property.
Or
That'd be the-
whatever
or a
source they were
neighbor.
getting it
The
from.
one
that'd
aerial
be the
photograph does show that it was in production in 1945.
And
That
I
was
have that up
before.
on the screen.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been.
So
in
it's
production.
very similar to the other 7 that
Yes.
have been approved.
I would say yes.
Thank you.
Okay, where we stand right now, to reconstruct, we have a motion to approve, a second to approve, that doesn't include an amendment to abandon the small domestic well. That's where we are. Everybody agreed? Okay, let's have a roll call on that, please.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay, we are at that point in time, we're down to administrative reports, a motion to receive and file,
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
Any objection? Hearing none, so moved.
Mr. Chairman, before you close this, I want to make an announcement. Our
We're going to make an announcement.
Our small pumpers group met yesterday, and at the close of this meeting, this will be my last meeting. I'll be here with you. I'm relinquishing my chair to Eugene West, who's the current chairman of Camarosa. I was hoping he'd be here so I could introduce him. He emailed me last night, and he can't get here because he's in court at the 2nd District in Los Angeles because he's an attorney. So for those of you who wondered when we were going to lawyer up, now you know. We're seating an attorney on this board effective next month. Thank you.
Okay.
Who's the alternate?
Gene West, he's...
The alternate?
Oh, the alternate will remain Andy Waters.
Okay.
And I'm sure that'll come in a letter. I wanted to say goodbye to everybody so they know what the reason, but you'll see me sitting out there with Sam and everybody else next month.
Dave, we got you on the list as the alternate, okay? Anybody else, anything else? Thank you.